My name is Linn Søvig. I'm here basically to talk to you about games, and more importantly, game developers and how we really should be focusing on building game developers. I'll also go into gamification, as I was introduced to do, and I'll do that during the end. But first of all, I just wanted to talk about what it is exactly I do. So we talked about the fact that I'm a board member for something called the Game Developers Guild, and I've been working with them for about 3 years. And it's a group of game developers that got together and said, hey, listen, we're competitors, but we're competitors in a really huge global market. Maybe we could work together, learn a little bit from each other, and start building the industry together so that united we can maybe be a little bit stronger, and we can build this industry and make sure that we commercialize it and make it sustainable in some shape or form. So game development in Norway, there's actually over 90 companies working on game development in Norway. And I think anybody in the community can probably just mention about 20. And it's very much a startup community. So a lot of the game developers or game developing companies are about 4 or 5 employees. And they work very lean. A lot of you probably know the sort of lean business model. So they're not really rich, and they're focusing on their games, and they're working together. And these 4 to 5 people are working very much on the production of the game, the development of the game. So all their focus and all their funds go into the actual production of the game. And so when it comes to marketing and sales, first of all, there's not hardly any funds left to do that. And second of all, these tasks have a tendency to fall onto the CEO, who's already overworked trying to get his product on the line. So one of the things that I'm doing is trying to build a resource center for these game developers. We want the game developers to be able to call my center and say, hey, listen, I have this great idea for a game. How on earth am I going to get the funding to get this started? Where can I find the programmers? Where can I find the artists? Where can I find the funds? And then when they're all a little bit along the way, they can call us and say, we're about there. We want to go to the huge game conference, GDC. Who should we be talking to? Can you help us set up meetings? Make sure that they meet the right people, the right publishers, the right journalists, and distribution channels. Because they're so small teams that building up that network all on your own and from the beginning, it just seems kind of pointless. It seemed better for the game developers to get together and make sure that we built that network together. Another thing that we're focusing on for this resource center is the fact that we need more investors in Norway, exactly like what Odd was talking about. There just is very little courage. You called it cowardice, I think it was. But it was very little risk capital, and games industry is a very risky business. So one of the things that we really want to make sure to do with the resource center is make sure that international investors know about the game developing community in Norway, and that we're thriving and doing well. And we are thriving. It's amazing. You're going to see so many great titles coming out of Norway. And I'm so proud of these game developers because they're sitting very much all by themselves, and there's hardly any funding for them to tap into. There's hardly any support systems there at all. They're really doing this just out of their passion because they want to create games. And they're living off of next to nothing doing this as well. Which also, there's a positive side to this as well. Because they're working so much on their own, there is no one theme that's Norwegian game developing. You can't see a game and say, oh, that's Norwegian. There's nothing unified there. We're very diverse. So we have amazing mobile games, we have amazing computer games, and we have amazing console games. And they're all coming out now, and we're going to be, you're going to notice us, is basically what I want to tell you. So that's pretty much what I'm working on. But I thought maybe I'd talk about how I got here. So 10 years ago, I played my first computer game. And maybe you guys can notice this, but I wasn't exactly a teenager at that time. I was writing my master's thesis in media studies, and I was writing about freedom of speech in virtual worlds. I was really fascinated about the subject about the self in virtual worlds, how this representation of self. And the more I read, the more I saw that a lot of players and a lot of net citizens or people, members of these virtual worlds, were really getting upset because they felt that their freedom of speech was being violated because they couldn't express themselves, what their sexuality were, or come with some criticism towards the game. They might suddenly find themselves thrown out of the game. So there was a lot of talk about this, and this fascinated me. I really wanted to figure this out. Is that virtual representation of yourself, does your human right to free speech actually entail that representation as well? And I said so many times, there's no way I'm touching games. If I start touching games, I am not going to be taken seriously at all, because it's just stupid people, not stupid, ridiculous people are looking into games and everything. And in the end, of course, one of my advisors went, well, I'm sorry, Linn, you're going to have to start playing games, because you can't really go into these virtual worlds and not see what the game is and what reality is. And so I had to play, and I went in kicking and screaming, not wanting to play, because I had this vision in my head of, this lonely girl sitting in front of this computer screen, and it just looked so sad being so involved with this computer screen. It looked very isolated and very sad. And so, of course, I was forced to start playing games, and ever since I've been in love with computer games. I absolutely adore them. I mean, the first thing was they were really, really hard. It's really challenging to play games. It's not something that's mind-numbing at all. You really need to think, and there's lots of problem solving, and you really have to get involved. And then second of all, there's these magical worlds that are just filled with stories and filled with wonder. So I just absolutely fell in love with games, and ever since I've felt sort of compelled to tell people, listen, you need to play games. I needed to convince all the skeptics like me that games were this wonderful new world that everybody needed to discover. So I've done that in different types of ways. I've blogged, and I've joined different types of guilds and played with different types of people, and I've also become sort of an expert on something called machinima, which is films made in games. And but at some point I actually got a job, and I was seduced by the fact of having an income, so I was away from games for a while. But about 3 years ago, I came to sort of a crossroads, and I had to consider a few things in my life. And one of the things was I missed that passion about talking about games and telling people that games were, the future. We needed to look to games to find innovation and art and answers. So I wandered around, and I thought, okay, I need to get into the games industry somehow. I really want to do this. And so I went to this event, and I was listening to these great game developers. They're so amazing. They're so talented. And they were talking to a room with about, 80 people or something. But they were very, very internal. And I think we were 3 people in the room that understood their jokes. And we laughed, but you could hear our echoes, right? So it was just so sad, because it felt like their talent was just sort of going out to the room and just dying into the room. People weren't seeing how brilliant they really were. And I thought, I can do that. I can translate geek to other people. I'm certain I can do that. And I was absolutely convinced that this is something I could do, because I love talking. And again, I'd found this passion. I needed to tell people that these computer games had so much greatness in them. Everybody needs to know this, and we need to encourage more game development. So I slowly went out in the world and proclaimed myself to be an amazing communicator and a talented marketer, and all game developers in Norway should hire me to market their product. I very soon realized, first of all, nobody really had the funds to do this. And second of all, I really didn't know what I was talking about. I knew how to talk about games to other people, but then you have to consider the fact that the games industry is huge. It's larger than the movie industry at the moment. And some are even saying larger than the music industry. So there's a lot of meta industry there. For example, there's a game conference expo in Cologne, Germany, every year in August. And I went down there with my business cards, and I thought, oh, I'll get my contacts with Sony and you know, Microsoft, Xbox, and everything. And I come down there, and it was, you know, just the trade show, just for the industry people, there's about 50,000 people just from Europe just going to this trade show, just talking business of games. And I hadn't booked a meeting, and then there was no way for me to get a meeting, because that's what you did beforehand, of course. And then it was also extremely amazing, because you have one day where you can go to the actual commercial side, so you can go play the games, because there's, you know, football fields of games available for people to play. And then on the Thursday, they open it up for the regular public. And there's this flood of 300,000 people coming to see just the games that we've been talking about, and that we've been talking about selling and showing and marketing. And it's an amazingly large industry. So one of the things I realized was that, oh, okay, I need to learn the media industry within the game industry before I can really say that I can do any marketing. And it was vast. There's also, you know, the YouTubers, the individual blogs and everything. So I very soon realized that I didn't know what I was doing, that I needed to learn a lot more. And also the fact that I didn't really understand the business when it came to launch. For example, there's exclusivity when it comes to games, and you say that you're gonna launch on an Xbox or something, and then you have to wait for a while on the PlayStation. There was a lot of things that I didn't know. But I wasn't going to give up. I was absolutely convinced that this is something that I really was good at. I could convince you that you needed to play more games. This I was absolutely positive of. So I regrouped with the game developers and said, okay, I can't do this part. But maybe what I can do is go around selling games to other people. You know, see if I can sell it to, you know, the oil industry, the health industry, and so on. And they were just like, why? Why would you want to do that? And I realized my mindset was completely different from them, because I was saying, but you can earn money if you talk to these people. You can earn that money and then focus on creating your game and yeah, get in that money so that you can eat while you're creating your game, you know? And they were like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be interesting for us in any shape or form. And I didn't understand that. I really didn't. I soon did, but I didn't understand how that could be a problem. And they were sporty about it. They said, okay, Linn, you know, go for it. Go talk to these industries and say, and see what you bring back. And so I thought I'd give you my little spiel. So this is a Tetris lamp. Yeah, and I use it basically, this picture, just to demonstrate exactly what game developers do. So I mean, you have the programmers, right? So the programmers are saying, well, these blocks, they're going to be this heavy and everything. I had no idea gravity had such an important role in game development, but it really does. And it has to have a certain texture, and when one block touches the other, a light comes up. So it's, you know, coding, it's programming, it's completely makes sense, right? So you have programmers in game development, and then you have, of course, the artists, making sure that the texture, everything looks nice. I mean, everything that you think an artist does is pretty much what they do in games, right? And then there's the magic language that game developers have managed to create, maybe. It's that we call it maybe gameplay. It's that way that makes you want to interact with it. For example, this Tetris Lamp, I have it in my house, and for every time I have people over, it looks different. And I'm now documenting it, taking pictures for each time somebody's been to my house and sort of saying that that's somebody's creation. One of my friends, she's obsessed with my lamp. She's absolutely convinced that she can make a complete square or rectangle with even sides, and she just keeps trying and keeps trying and keeps trying. And it invites you, the lamp invites you to start playing with it. You really want to do something with it. You want to create your own. And then at the same time, it's very structured. There's very little creativity you can do with it, but you can play with it. And that's the secret language of game development. I'm going around telling these different industries what this is, and saying, you know, this is a major communication that's going on, and this is communication skills that we're fundamentally talking about. Because so often in other industries, you can't see the artists or the creative people and the scientists being able to talk and interact with each other. Game developers have managed to do that by creating these wonderful games. And that's amazing skills. They're sitting on a skill set here that a lot of industries can have a lot of potential and a lot of good from. So I keep sort of trying to sell the fact that we need to use more game developers. And I usually get, yeah, you know, applause, sort of, oh, that was really cute the way you brought up that Tetris lamp. That was really sweet. And hey, I love praise, so I'll take anything, you know? And it was just, it's fun. And then, but usually they just sort of sit back, but you know, we're just interested in the technology. We just really want the programmers that program that what happens when these blocks touch each other, there's a light. And we're not really interested in the interactivity. We're not interested in the playfulness. We want people to work in our industry. We don't want people to have fun, first of all, right? And so I got really, I wouldn't say depressed, but it saddened me. It saddened me, this low sense of adventure, especially within the scientific communities, that they just wanted to draw out the technology of games and forget how to actually use the technology, which is where the game developers are amazing. They're great at communicating that. Then we started talking about gamification. And it's such a great buzzword going on now, and I love the fact that gamification is a buzzword at the moment. Because as I'm saying, game developers are great at this communication. They're great at getting you engaged with their products. But one of the things that we've been seeing a lot with the buzzword gamification is that it's pretty much a top layer that you put on the product afterwards. So imagine, for example, this Tetris lamp being just a lamp that somebody has drawn some Tetris blocks on. And that's where some people go wrong, because this Tetris lamp was always meant to be interactive. It was always meant to be played with. Right from the start, they knew that they wanted to gamify their lamp. And that's where my appeal to you is. If we're going to be using game technology and game theories and gamification, as it's called, we need to make sure that it's used very early on in the process. And you need to, of course, use games as an example to making engaged customers. For example, think about all the information that a game developer actually manages to put into the game. They need to think about the fact that when you open up that game, you need to know where to go. Where are you supposed to be going? What are you supposed to be doing? Are you supposed to be hitting the flower that's coming near you, or are you supposed to be grabbing the flower? There's so much information that's communicated just in those few seconds, telling you whether you're going to be going to right, to the left. And they're masters at this. There's absolutely masters at getting a lot of information in a very beautiful or very pretty atmosphere and worlds. And we need to tap into that. So basically what I'm doing now is, instead of trying to convince the other industries to make sure that they use the game developers or the programmers and game developers so that they can earn money, what I want now is to tell people we need to just focus on the game industry and let them be a creative industry in their own right. So you were talking as well about commercialization. This is definitely what we want to do. We want to get the game developer industry up to a commercialized level, a sustainable level, so that we can grow and do things. Of course, I still think, for example, that the oil industry can use a lot of the game technology that we are producing, but let it be on our turf or our terms, is basically, because too often, and we've seen this so much, and I hate to repeat what's already been said here as well, is that we see a lot of the technology and the programmers of the game industry sort of being swallowed up by the oil industry because they can pay better and they're more stable. So my dream is, of course, to get a very sustainable and great game industry there. Saying that, I feel I've been sort of very negative and just saying that the whole world is against game developing. That's absolutely not true. We've been welcomed by so many, and one of the industries that I think is doing a lot of great work is the health industry. And we had a workshop, a gamification workshop with the hospital here. And we were sort of thinking, okay, we're going to have to need, half an hour to warm them up to the whole fact that games is brought into a serious workshop environment. And we experienced the exact opposite. They just sat there so ready to talk about how games can help them create engagement with their patients and what kind of products they can create looking at games to communicate with patients as well. And there's so many great examples of people doing this right. And one of my absolute favorite, and I need to mention this, is a project in the States with something called Hope Labs. And what they did was they brought kids who were going through some kind of cancer treatment, either it was chemotherapy or other types of drugs, and they brought them together with game developers. The crucial word here being game developers, right? And they put them in the same room, and they said, okay, you guys create some games. And they did. They created 6 excellent games. It's called Remission. And these games are so fun. And it's so weird sitting there in front of your computer and giggling at these games that are really sad because it's about cancer and what's going on in these children's bodies as they're fighting the cancer. But they're really fun and they're really informative and they're amazing. And for me, I've never known more about cancer treatment than after I played those games. And I had a lot of fun doing it and engaging with them. So I think that's a perfect example because of using game developers and using the art, the profession of game development at a very early development stage can create great results. I basically want game development to be a great industry, and one of the things that we are having a hard time with in Norway, for example, is the culture industry, right? So this is a culture industry. It's also a technology industry. And we want to make sure that this industry grows so that it can grow and become better at what it really does. And then the vision is, of course, that this knowledge, all of this, these skills that these game developers are getting is going to trickle down onto local businesses and local industries. So you'll get the great programmers, and you'll get the great audio-visual guys and everything. So I guess my last statement is, let's make the game industry grow to make Norway such a great, innovative place to be.